So the sonnet starts with us really seeing Shakespeare asking for permission for to compare his lover, just for simplicity's sake, let's say it's a girl, to a summer's day. And so let's first just read the poem as a whole, because with Shakespeare, it's weird. You can't just like crack open a Shakespeare book and just start reading. You kind of have to know a little bit about the rules of reading Shakespeare and the tricks and techniques. It's not just like, bam, you're reading Shakespeare. So let's read the poem as a whole, and then we'll kind of talk about it line for line. And the cool thing is, once you practice how to read Shakespeare in this activity, you'll be better equipped to read it in Romeo and Juliet, which is what we'll be doing next class. So, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So let's look at those, those first 8 lines before we get into the rest. It starts off with him saying, like, can I compare you to a summer's day? Like, even though these words seem like they're old fashioned, I want you to notice that you recognize most of these words. I mean, shall, it's a weird word, but we know it, right? Compare, summer, more, lovely, more. Maybe you don't know temperate, but like temperature. So there are going to be words that are weird, like thee or thou. But guess what? Thee and thou just mean you. I pray thee, tell me what is wrong with thou. It's just, again, it's just you, right? So shall I compare you to a summer's day? You, art. Well, what does art sound like? It sounds a whole lot like are, right? That's what it is. It's are, right? You are more lovely and more temperate. So he's basically saying, like, guess what, babe? I'm going to compare you to a summer's day. You know what? You're better than a summer's day. You're even more lovely. You're even more beautiful. You're even more temperate. You're even more, like, you make me feel even better, like, oh, if it's a nice temperate day, it's very comfortable. And so everything after this line we know is going to be a metaphor. He's not really talking about the weather. He's talking about a woman, and he's using the weather and a summer's day to compare her, to kind of give her a love poem. I can kind of picture him like, crushing on this girl, and he's like, trying to impress her. And so he writes this, and he's trying to sort of get her to like him based on this. So he says, thou art more lovely and more temperate. But then he makes a concession, which is kind of like, sometimes it's not the truth, right? He said, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. So when you read Shakespeare, it's annoying at first, I promise, but it gets better. You have to kind of read it multiple times, and you have to think first on a literal level and then on a figurative level. So first, think about rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Okay, rough winds, I can picture rough winds. What are darling buds? Buds, little flowers, little baby flowers. Okay, so little baby flowers, the darling buds of May, right? Tiny little flowers are being shaken by the wind. Okay, rough winds, rough winds. So that idea that there's something that's like innocent and delicate that's being shaken violently by rough winds, you could interpret that a lot of ways. When I look at it, and you could be bringing your own personal experience into this, it's poetry, right? So there's never going to be a right or wrong answer. When I look at it, I kind of see like, well, let me get my cords all untangled. Well, you do, how about, well, you are affected by forces outside of your control. And now if you're doing this along with me, what I want to challenge you to do, and that's the difference between like plagiarism and not plagiarism, I want you to put this into your own words. I'm putting it into my own words, and maybe you just take my words and reword them, but maybe you see something else in it, right? Maybe rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Maybe to you, that's talking about their relationship, right? So maybe for you, the line is like, sometimes our relationship gets rocky. Like, oh, sorry, I can't type today. So there's multiple answers for the same translation. I'm not really looking for a right or wrong answer, as I'm looking for, did they use the evidence to inform their translation? If you put for line 3, it gets windy sometimes, that's not it. That's half of it. Great. So you get 50%. That's still enough. But I mean, that's half of it. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Okay, he's sort of talking about flowers in the wind, but then you have to go back. It's a metaphor. Shakespeare is always speaking in metaphors. He's not really a literal person. He's gonna, compare emotions to weather and personify everything. So you have to go back then and think about, well, what's the metaphor? Where's the figurative language? Okay, we're not talking about a summer's day. We're talking about thee. We're talking about her. Oh, so how could a woman be like darling buds? Oh, woman's delicate like a flower. How could a woman be shaken by rough winds? Well, can you control what wind? I mean, no, wind is kind of like crazy. It's insane. So maybe it's like the woman is being shaken. Maybe the things that are outside of her control are like, family conflict or issues, or maybe other people are, like bullying her or something. And so he's like, sometimes, babe, like you don't have the best of days, and that's okay. So really, all of those things are correct. I'm only going to put one to keep it simple, but I don't want you to think that there's just one right or wrong answer. Really, it's about interpreting it. Just like if I hear a song and you hear a song, you're going to hear slightly different messages. It's the same thing. As long as you're applying the figurative language and you're pushing your analysis into past the literal, past that this is about the weather, past that, this is about the summer, and talking about the woman, and like love and life and all that stuff, that's where you're going to get full credit. And summer's lease hath all too short a date. So again, that word hath at first would be like, hath. Okay, I'm out. There's thee, there's shall, there's thou, there's art. Now she's saying hath. No, peace out. I'm done. Like too hard. No, what does hath sound like? Sounds a whole lot like had, right? Or have. So same with how art sounds like are. Thou kind of sounds like you. Shall sounds like should. A lot of these words are just fancy ways of saying words. And so once you kind of get over that, like, thing, then you'll feel a lot more confident and you'll be like, oh, wait, I actually know like all of these words. And remember, Shakespeare, he's kind of like Yoda. He's not like, will you go to the mall with me tomorrow afternoon? Yoda would be like, afternoon tomorrow, mall with me, you go. Right? He would say it all backwards and silly and stuff, right? And that's how Shakespeare is. He flips things around. He says things in a funny order. He puts a lot of descriptive words and fancy words. And so sometimes you just got to skip it if the word is too hard. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So summer's lease hath all too short a date. Okay, so literally a lease, that's like, when you rent something and then it's up, it's too short a date. So how could you rent summer? Oh, well, summer's short, it's has a finite amount of time, like summer only lasts for so long, right? And so maybe honestly, even if you just write something like, and summer ends too quickly, you'll get some good credit there, because that is what he's saying. But he's also saying more. He's also talking about the woman, right? Again, all of this isn't literal. So summer's lease hath all too short a date. Maybe it's like, and your good times are, fleeting or temporary, but they eventually come back, right? Like kind of how I see it is like summer's lease hath all too short a date. Time flies when you're having fun, your best times are obviously limited. I could be in a great mood one day, but it's not like I'm going to be in a great mood for the rest of my life. And so he's kind of just saying, just like summer, babe, there's winter and fall and spring, and you have all your seasons, right? He's not just talking about weeks of the month. He's talking about life, right? And then I love this line 5, because for people who are introduced to Shakespeare, this is, I think, a really good example of how to kind of think on a two-step basis, which sounds difficult, but I swear it gets easier. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. So you have to imagine the literal, sometime too hot, the eye of heaven shines. Where's heaven? Okay, heaven is up. What would be up that's hot and shines? Oh, the sun. Okay. Sometimes the sun shines too hot. Okay, but are we talking about the sun? No, we're talking about a woman. So how could a woman be like the sun in that she's too hot? And not like, oh my God, you are so hot, but like you're hot-headed, hot-tempered, intense. So you could say like sometimes, oops, oh, what's going on there? Sometimes, babe, you get a little intense, you know, sometimes you get a little hot-headed. And a bit extra, right? And often is his gold complexion dimmed. This, again, is another example of you can't look at Shakespeare line for line and try to understand it. You have to look at the line before it, the line after it. You have to understand the context. If you looked at line 6 on your own, you'd be like, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. What? What's this about? Who's he? Wait, we're talking about a guy? I'm so confused. But if you look at line 5, you'll see, oh, no, actually, it's that he was just talking about the sun. It would make sense. The sun is like a masculine figure. So when and he's gold, right? Golden. So his gold complexion is dimmed by what? What could dim? So again, you have to think literal, right? Okay, often is his gold complexion dim. Okay, so the sun is getting dimmer. What will make the sun dimmer? I mean, clouds, a storm, or nighttime, right? So now that's the literal. He's saying, and sometimes it becomes nighttime, sometimes it gets cloudy, sometimes it gets stormy. How can you apply that to a woman, right? You know, like sometimes you get moody or depressed, you know, like your light goes out, it dims, right? And that's, I'm not going to use the word dimmed because that's what's used here. You don't want to repeat words, but it's the idea of like, if your eyes are like the sun and then the light goes out of your eyes, it's like you're just not feeling very happy. And every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. So fair is always going to mean beauty in Shakespeare's terms. It's not going to be like referee, like, hey, you're out. No, that's not fair. No, it's going to be like, oh, my fair lady, my fair beauty, the fairest maiden in all the land. So it just means beautiful. And if you look at it like that, and every beauty from beauty sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Okay, and every beauty from beauty sometimes declines by nature or by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. How can beauty decline? Well, what happens when beauty declines? Beauty declines. Oh, you get ugly, right? What's the opposite of beauty? Ugly. So he says, and every beauty declines. Everyone gets ugly by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. There's two ways you can get ugly in life. You can either get ugly by chance, you know, maybe you have a horrible accident, disfigurement, you know, something horrible happens, or like you gain a lot of weight and lose it or get burned. I don't know, like whatever he thinks is not pretty, he's saying it could happen by chance, or it could happen by nature's changing course untrimmed. And in that metaphor, you have to kind of imagine in your head, what is nature's changing course? Okay, nature's changing course. Well, I guess actually it would still be linear, right? It's like nature's changing course, untrimmed, right? Well, sometimes to think about what the metaphor is, you have to think about what the opposite of the metaphor would be. Nature's changing course. Well, nature's changing course, that must be life, right? You know, how nature takes its course. That's life. And if it's untrimmed, maybe I don't understand that yet, but maybe I can start to understand it by asking myself, well, what would it look like if it was trimmed? What if oops, I didn't mean to do that. What if I just, cut off a bit right there? What just happened? Well, you just died, right? You dead, right? I can't even write it on here. it's cut short, right? You die. So if nature's changing course, trimmed means you die, what does untrimmed mean? What's the opposite of dying? You live. Because guess what? If you don't get your nature's changing course trimmed, you get to be old. And guess what? I've never seen a hot 98-year-old. I'm sorry. I just haven't. Prove me wrong or don't, please. But it's something that naturally you're going to lose your beauty, is what he's saying. He's saying basically, babe, you're going to get ugly. And how are you going to get ugly? Either by chance, like by accident, or like a freak, like by a freak accident. Or just because you get old. And so he's like kind of saying, like, I'm not even like worried about it because I know you're going to get ugly one way or the other. If you get ugly because you're old, then yay, we've survived, we're alive. And then there's the turn at 9. 9 is the turn. 9 is where you go, something big is happening. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of the fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So as long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So he's saying, you know what? After all of this, though, I can tell you, I know you're going to get ugly, but guess what? Your eternal summer will never fade. Like the thing that makes you special will never go away. Like we'll never leave you. Nor lose possession of the fair thou owest. And, you will never lose what is yours, like maybe like your inner light or whatever. And this is a beautiful line, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Basically, again, with Shakespeare, you've got to sometimes imagine these things and think literally and then think figuratively. Death bragging, that would mean death's a person, right? Because only people brag, right? Never seen, maybe elephants can brag. I don't know. They seem a little braggy to me, but usually humans are the ones bragging. So death is the human personified, death personified. Okay, so you can picture, like the Grim Reaper. How would he brag that you wandered in his shade? Well, I mean, if death is interacting with you at all, you're probably dead. Sorry. But not only are you dead, but you're in death's shade. You kind of have to picture it like a tree makes shade, but this isn't a tree, it's death. So you have to like picture kind of like the shade of a Grim Reaper. What is that implying? Where's the metaphor there? If I go, oh, that person, he's in death's shade, basically no one's looking at him anymore. He's not focused on, right? Shade is the opposite of highlight, right? Shade is the opposite of out there in the open and focused on. And so he's saying that, a lot of people when they die, they fall into death's shade and they stop being talked about and they stop being remembered because they're in death's shade. But I'm telling you that you will actually not do that. And here's why you won't do it. Because, babe, I put you in an eternal line. I put you in eternal lines of a poem. And through eternal lines, you grow bigger. And so really, you will not be forgotten. You guys know, like, I believe his name's like Johnson Edwards Appleseeds. He lived in probably like the early 1800s. He had a farm in New Mexico. Have you heard of him? Yeah, no, neither have I. That's because he's in death's shade and everyone's forgotten about him and no one talks about him. And that's why he's in death's shade, because no one thinks about him anymore. No one talks about him. No one reads about him. No one looks at pictures of him. I mean, he existed at one point, but now he's just in death's shade. Unless you talk about people, you're going to eventually not remember them. And we remember people who were dead that were famous because they were written about, right? Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Abraham Lincoln. These people have things written about them, and therefore they stay eternal and alive in our memories. Like Harriet Tubman, I can picture her. Abe Lincoln, I can picture him. I've never met them. They lived hundreds or 100 years ago, and you don't know them, but you do. And he's saying here, guess what, babe? I am going to write a poem about you. I am going to put you in my poetry. And to time thou growest. Remember, thou is you. And in time, you are going to grow. So actually, where normally people, when they die, they get smaller, literally because like their body decays, but also like figuratively because people stop talking about them. In this case, you're actually going to get bigger. You thought you were like, you thought you had friends in life. In death, so many more people are going to know about you. It's kind of like Vincent van Gogh. He didn't get famous until after he died, right? He's saying, guess what, babe? If I put you in this poem, after you die, you're probably just going to get even bigger. And I don't mean like bloating of corpses. I mean like fame. And guess what? He's right. Because as long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, so long lives this poem. And this poem gives life to thee. So as long as there are people on this earth to read poems, then you're going to be read about. And therefore live forever, right? Guess what? He's right. Because it is 2021 and we are reading a poem about a crush of Shakespeare's from 450 years ago. And she actually has grown bigger in death, because I'm sure she did not have tons of people writing, reading, discussing her beauty when she was alive. But now that she's dead, because Shakespeare has put her in eternal lines, she's grown with time. So this is like the harder of the two poems. The other poem is actually meant to be introduced in fourth grade because it's very simple in its language and there's not too much like metaphor there. This one would definitely be the harder. So the second one, I'm going to kind of let you do more on your own. But I, again, want to just point out that process that you need to follow. You need to think literal and then figurative. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Okay, well, yeah, obviously your mistress's eyes aren't flaming balls of fire. That's actually a star that's slowly dying while supporting a solar system. I mean, I knew that. No, well, why would you say sun is your eyes are like the sun? Oh, maybe because they're shining and they're bright. But he's saying my mistress's eyes are not like the sun. So then what's the opposite of that? Like my girlfriend's eyes are not bright. They don't shine. Coral is far more red than her lips red. Like her lips are kind of pale. Her lips aren't rosy. Right? Like the epitome of like beauty back then would be like, rosy cheeks, rosy lips, very graceful. This line kind of trips people up sometimes, not just because it says the word breast in it, but because it has this word done. But it's sort of like you need to be okay with not knowing some words and then use your context clues to understand the words around it. For example, these two words, you don't really need to know what they mean in order to understand the sentence. Because so far, he's kind of like putting her on blast, right? Like he's kind of like he's burning her a bit, like my mistress's eyes, they're nothing like the sun. Coral, it's far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. If hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. So obviously he's kind of following that pattern of like, oh, if this is good, she is bad. If the sun is what you want your eyes to be like, her eyes are nothing like the sun. If coral is how you want lips to be, her eyes are nothing like coral. If snow is how you want girl's skin to look, her skin is nothing like snow. And then you have to think about, well, what does snow look like? It's white, it's pure, it's clean. And so I don't think he's talking about race. I think he's talking about cleanliness, right? So like, if snow is the measure of cleanliness, if it says If it says as clean as snow, my girlfriend, she's not snow, you know, like if you use the say she's not clean, like you know, like she's not clean like snow. You've seen snow and you've seen dirty snow, and they're two different things. And he's saying, my girl, you know, she's no snow princess. And then the black wires one, I think that's, you know, pretty easy. Like, what would you, if someone's saying that your hair is like wiry? I mean, it's probably like messy or dry or brittle, right? So hair is messy, dry, brittle, whatever it is. I don't know exactly what he was thinking. So ultimately, you can picture in your mind. But then this, I'm not going to go over the entire poem because this is something that I know that you guys can do on your own. But this line, I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. Okay, so you might see the word damasked and be like, too many hard words. I already saw done. They already said breast, and I had to hear my teacher say that like 5 times. Now damasked? Nope. Peace out. I'm done with this. Well, guess what? Instead of like freaking out about it, just skip it. Just forget it. Same with the done thing, right? Like you can get the pattern that he's established already. So now you just kind of got to read what you do know. I have seen roses red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. See how when I took the word out, it's basically the same sentence? When you look at it, it's not actually that important because the main idea is that he's seen hell of roses in his life and he can tell you those cheeks ain't roses, right? So ultimately, the meaning doesn't change when you look up damasked and you find out damasked is a type of a certain type of rose that's really symmetrical and stuff. But like, does that matter? No, because Shakespeare, he's an artist. He's going to pad this stuff a little bit with some fancy language, with some really descriptive adjectives. He's going to over describe everything from people's emotions to how they look to how they're acting. And it's your job to kind of sometimes be okay with not knowing every word. Remember in class, I did say you can not understand 15% of a text. And as long as you understand the other 85%, you can actually get the overall message. So when you skip that word damasked, you can just be like, you know, oh, I've seen hella roses in my day. And I can tell you, her cheeks are not pink like roses. Okay, so ultimately, when you're doing this, you just have to think about the literal and then apply it to the figurative, right? Whether you're thinking about how roses could be like lips, whether you're thinking about how a woman could be like a sun that's shining too hot. Shakespeare's always talking in double entendres. So I'm going to stop recording. And if you guys have questions, you can send me an email. This is always the hard part because I have to find the button.